the most interesting creative paths are rarely straight lines. Today's guest takes us on a journey from a love for Scandinavian black metal in tropical Australia to an English pub to a surprise party with a Maharaja in India. I'm talking today with the brilliant artist Melissa Hamlyn, the surface pattern designer behind the Painted Lady Studio, whose vibrant fusion of the physical and the digital is now available on the Vieunite art platform. In this conversation, we're going to learn how a nickname she earned for her tattoos became her creative identity, how she made a savvy and resilient career pivot during the pandemic uncertainty of 2020, and why risk-taking is a creative non-negotiable. I start, though, by asking Melissa how she came on to the Vieunite art platform.
So how I first came across Vieunite was I am currently part of a cohort of artists with a company called ArtShine, and they support artists through their journey to become surface pattern designers. And we also get mentoring. So Vin, who is my mentor as part of ArtShine, is always looking for great opportunities that would suit each artist. Each artist is very individual and different. So Vin thought that Vieunite would be a good platform for my artwork, because he thought it would suit sort of large scale and also small scale, and feels like it would look really good on a digital canvas just because it's a bit more dynamic, and my work, the way it becomes to be into the world, goes through a lot of different phases as well. So I think that sort of comes across through the platform through Vieunite. So we're so used to seeing art, it's sort of static form, framed on the wall, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like when your art is on a digital platform, it does change how people perceive it, and it can change how people can showcase it, and even how conversations happen around art as well. I think that could be a really different way of showcasing the art as well, and that would change depending on how it's displayed and where it's displayed. So it's quite diverse.
Absolutely agree with that. Your perspective at Vieunite, of course, it's wonderful to have your work in the library and to be able to bring it into different environments, whether that's someone's home or restaurant decor. It's a different kind of audience for your work from what you might be able to realise in the conventional gallery system. But there's not a lot that's conventional about your career, is there, Melissa? And I've got to begin with the origin story. So I have to ask about your name. The Painted Lady Studio is a fascinating title for your sort of creative output. It's so evocative and memorable. There must be a story behind it.
So, yeah, there's a bit of a story behind my studio, which is the Painted Lady Studio. So when I was younger, I used to work in the UK. I was doing what all Australians do, which is a working holiday visa in the UK so we can travel the world. And I was working in a rural pub, and we had a lot of local customers in that area who got to know me very well. And usually I was covered up because it was a bit cold, but as summer came, obviously T-shirts and things came out more, and I have quite a lot of tattoos. I got tattooed sort of starting in my 20s. They're quite prevalent. And I just got the nickname of Painted Lady. And I didn't think too much of it at the time. It was a fun name that I would get called. And then later in life, when I was working as an artist and I was trying to think of what to call my studio, I decided to call it Painted Lady, partly because it was a nickname that I'd been given. It is a nickname given to women who have tattoos historically. I've sort of heard it before, and it doesn't sort of dictate a specific art form. It's quite a broad or open term as well. So I feel like even though if my art changes format or medium, or maybe I decide to not do visual art, maybe I'll move into a different sort of maybe writing or something like that. I feel like it can all just fit under Painted Lady Studio, and I think it would always make sense. So a bit of backstory.
They're fabulous,
on the
and
name.
for me, the name kind of draws together the idea of a creative identity, because obviously a tattoo is on your body, it's your skin, it's really important to who you are as a person.
So for me, Painted Lady Studio was just more like, it became like a vessel or a name that could allow the work to come into the world. So it's not so much a brand. I guess having recognizable work is important as an artist, and like people see your work that they know it's you. So it's still important to have an identity under the moniker or the name that you might use.
Yes. Yeah. So you're drawing the distinction between a brand that might be managed as part of a business enterprise and the way in which your personal identity becomes a creative professional identity. So it's really the latter rather than the former, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Sort of more of a creative identity. And then, secondary to that would be the brand that is, Painted Lady Studio. Yeah. So when I was younger, I was born in Brisbane in Australia, so quite a warm tropical type environment. Into my teenage years, I got interested in Gothic music, particularly like 80s Gothic music, the dress sense and the visuals that went along with that as well. These in the Banshees, The Cure, Depeche Mode, bands like that. That would have moved into more like, I think, industrial like goth, which became a bit more of a thing in the 90s, like Ministry, so a bit heavier. And this led on to heavier forms of music like heavy metal and then black metal. I think black metal is really interesting to me because I was from a really tropical environment. So, black metal is a lot of black and leather and spikes and like heavy makeup. And because a lot of the bands were from Scandinavian countries. So it was a bit of a dissonance. Like I liked the music, but I didn't really understand why I liked it. And that kind of, as I got a bit older and I was working, I was earning money and I could save that money. And I thought, I want to go traveling. I want to go see what's going on in the world. Australia feels a bit isolated sometimes from other people. And so, I went to places like Norway to get a better understanding of the people and the culture and how this subgenre developed. Like it seemed like such a placid, nice country. It's very beautiful. It seems, economically quite a sound place as well. And when you get there and you're in the snow and you're in the forest, and then you can see the echoes of maybe what they see growing up and how they, being in nature and being such a small, insular little place as well. I wanted to just have a better understanding of that music and of those subcultures. So I guess you're trying to find like why you liked it, your identity, like your place in the world. Like, so that was how I sort of started off with my travel. And then from there, I've gone back and forth traveling over the years as well. So I just really enjoy meeting different people. You're being in different cultures. It kind of inspires you and keeps like driving you forward in terms of like creative ideas. Maybe not directly, like the work I make may not be specifically depicting of an experience or depict a place I've been, but it's imbued in the work, and it can't not influence your decisions in life. If you've traveled, it's always as part of you. So I found travel really liberating and just really giving me ideas and evolving the work that I do. It does it in a sort of a roundabout, non-direct way when you're going, when you travel. And there was a lot of, Australia, Norway, visually very different. I think I saw snow for the first time when I was 25. So that, for some people in cold countries, that seems like a crazy thing to say, but I had just never seen it. Just the visuals, I think, was inspiring. I think I do like myth or mythology or different types of, I was going to say religion, but maybe philosophies would be a better way of thinking it, or spiritual ways of thinking. Because they make sense to the place that you're in.
So are they like different ways of being in the world? They like are we talking about a philosophy that might almost form a kind of contrasting outlook, a fresh way of seeing the world for you?
Yeah, definitely. When you go traveling and you are exposed to other philosophies or ways of thinking, a pace of life, even, it definitely changes how you view the world and how then maybe you move within it as well, which I think as an artist, that is really important for an artist like myself who is often sort of inspired, or it's a bit of an overused word, inspired, but I am influenced by my environment. So it does change maybe how I think about making art or ideas that go into my art as well.
And there was a particularly important trip later on in your life, wasn't there, to Goa?
Yes. So through my progress throughout life and sort of studying art and travel, they sort of came together, and I ended up being an ambassador for a company called Vacation with an Artist. And the idea behind this company was to have short immersive experiences with masterclass people. And I had a great opportunity to work with an artist in Goa. They were ceramicists, a very well-known ceramicist in the area. So I traveled there, had this beautiful house in the middle of like a rainforest. And what I forgot about Goa too was it was actually colonized by the Portuguese. So it has this really beautiful influences in the sort of architecture as well. So there's really beautiful um, sort of environment to be in. He had his own studio at the back. He had like the pottery wheel, but I wasn't interested in the pottery wheel. I decided I wanted to do hand building of clay. I wanted to get like my hands a bit dirty and like, that sort of lovely, like textural, like getting really involved with the material. And I was sort of building shapes, abstract shapes, and I had some fabric that I was sort of pressing into to the clay that we would later fire up, and it had these beautiful like designs in it. So that was that aspect of it, like working with a master artist, learning a new technique. But so that does influence maybe how you think about your work, or maybe it has resonances with your interests of work you've done in the past. But then other experiences, like unexpected experiences, can also happen. And so while we were there, Thomas, his name was the ceramicist's name, invited me to a little soiree, I guess you could call it. Nearby, there was a hotel. It was by the water. It was really beautiful. And he said, "Oh, you should come. It's going to be some like really great artists, some like musicians. Some of the best musicians in India will be there. There'll be other artists and people there. It's like a bit of a opening for this like boutique hotel." And we get there, and the soiree was kind of headed by the Maharaja of the area, so the prince of the area that we're in. He was sort of launching this hotel in partnership with another lady. And that was quite surreal, like to be invited to just off the cuff. It was just one afternoon. It's like, "Oh, you might want to come. I'm just going to go to this, this party later on." And yeah, that was really interesting as well. So those unexpected, one, it's a travel story you can tell people. Not many people have probably been in the presence of a Maharaj, like a very intimate sort of party.
I certainly haven't.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that affects the work I might output. Like it may not be a depiction of the party, but I think if you're making artwork and you're thinking of an experience, or you're thinking back to a time maybe while you're doing your work, I feel like that can influence maybe your mark making, or sort of the type of art. So in a roundabout way, it can still influence your work. And I think like travel did that. So if travel is always going to be an influence and maybe impact how I make art in that way. Yeah.
So you make work from experience. I mean, would that be some advice that you might give an artist starting out? Have a life and then make the work. I mean, you need something to work from.
Yeah, advice I give to an artist just starting out. Life experiences, it is helpful when making artwork, but I think there are sometimes people might feel like they need to have like years of experience doing all sorts of stuff. But we all have life experience, so it doesn't have to be some grand thing. You don't have to be like traveling across the world and going to parties with like a Maharaj, or like me, or just doing things that are really out of the box. It could be anything, like even on your daily walks. Like when I first started making art or learning, being taught how to do it, we would go to like the botanical gardens, or you could sketch things on the way to your walk to school or to work or whatever that might be. So I feel like maybe not so much having a lived experience, but just being very aware of your surroundings and like really looking at even like things that you might consider to be quite mundane can become really interesting when you're making a work. Yeah, how you view it and how you use it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You've got to be a sponge as an artist. You've got to be able to draw the world into you as experiences of, as you say, I mean, they can be experiences of mundane things like the shape of a leaf or a quality of light under, certain weather conditions, perhaps. There might be something that you see every day, but you have to be able to look closely and draw that into you before you can then use it later on in your practice. I think it'd be a good idea now to have a look at and talk about some of your individual pieces of work. So we've got one of your works on the screen behind me at the moment, and what's this piece called?
This one's Sapana.
And that's part of a series of works which we have in the Vieunite library. And the one I particularly wanted to talk about today was this piece, which is, I think, called Nazarene Sky Blue.
Yeah, so this one is Nazarene. So with this artwork here called Nazarene, Nazarene's the Persian word meaning rose. And so I guess going back to talking about like travel and influences, when you're traveling, language is something you notice. So obviously, yes, English is very well spoken, but not always. And so you're seeing visual, like there's signs in different languages, you're hearing conversations around you. And although I'm not a fluent speaker in any other language, I think I wanted to like imbue that in the work, like words have them, like if it's rose, but I didn't want to use rose in English, I wanted to use a different language. So it's about sort of having layers in it. So it's obviously visually, yes, there's a rose in it, which is what the name is. But then if you don't know that, it might prompt you to have to like look a bit deeper into like what the meaning of that word is. And then it's like a lot of repetition of motifs. And this one is called Sky Blue, but there are other colorways. And I think the really cool thing with surface pattern design is it's not just colors for the sake of color. It's sort of different colors can evoke like a different mood or suit a different setting and sort of change the meaning of the work as well. So yeah, I quite enjoy repetition of color and imagery in the work.
Yes, and this is one of the other. Did you call it a colorway?
Yeah, a colorway. So different colorways. So the previous one was like a blue monochrome, I suppose, and then this colorway is, and it's a pink and a red. And then there could be another version that might have darker colors in it. I just call them colorways.
And we've got a number of different colorways. This is a term I'm learning from you today of various designs of yours in the library. So people could pick the design that resonates most with them, or possibly even works best in a particular room, or maybe matches their mood even.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Your process is a real fusion of the physical and the digital, isn't it? I think you start with paint and markers quite often before then transforming sketches in Photoshop. And I've read elsewhere that you've described it as applying a sculptural mind to a two-dimensional surface. I think it would be really informative for our viewers if you could walk us through the life of one of your motifs. So how did you take, say, this design from a physical sketch to a final layered digital pattern?
Yeah, so the life of a design can start out in various ways, but I usually start from the natural world first, so the physical things that are nearby. And so in this example, I've got the rose in there, which was being observed from daily life, maybe on a walk. I also take photos, so sometimes I might have an archive of photos that I can refer back to for inspiration as well. So still coming from the natural world, but like maybe not like in the immediate sort of environment that I have. So it starts out with like sketching, like understanding the shape of the rose. I sort of work a bit more abstract, so sort of, not dealing with color at the very beginning. I don't do that. I just sort of work in pencil or black pen and just sketch that out. Of like geometrics and shapes. So I might decide, I might just sort of do sort of florals with sort of more geometric elements to it. So I'll start off with composition, and it becomes like what I think looks good to my eye in terms of the composition of what it should look like. The sketching then can turn into a more refined work. So I'll sort of start to get down some colors that I like, play around with that, experiment with that. And then to digitize it, I generally will scan the image and import it into Photoshop. So with that, you can change colors in Photoshop as well. You don't have to do it beforehand, but it's something I just really enjoy doing physically. I don't like being constantly on the computer making art. I feel a bit disconnected from it sometimes. And then I can alter it in Photoshop. It's really easy to play around with different colors that I might like and change the composition, a lot easier than in real life. But then once that's done, I usually bring them back into the real world again. I might print them out as prints or even just a Xerox copy, just so I can just have a look and see what it looks like and see if I might change anything. Sometimes I can cut them up and collage it. It might change again. So it's a lot of like repetition. It's quite cyclic, and it's sort of my own taste. So it's sort of once I decide it's ready, it's ready. And I actually don't know what that is. I can't pinpoint it, but it's more just like an aesthetic or a know that you have. Yeah.
Yes.
The work.
That's just artistic judgment, isn't it? I mean, what better kind of arbiter is there for your work than you? It's got to work for you. And I think if it's you're true to your creative instincts, you're more likely to be successful as an artist.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of where that sculptural element comes into a 2D image it ends up technically as a 2D image, but like the process of getting there isn't 2D, it's very sculptural, and it can be quite tactile, and the different different sort of substrates that I might use as well. So it's always introducing like elements of that tactility and sculptural elements, and even collage itself is sculptural, sort of a jigsaw of pieces you're trying to like mold into a shape. So,
and I think you've got some examples of that. So in your work in progress that you were kind enough to send me in advance of this, there's some things that you're currently working on which might end up being surface designs, possibly in the Vieunite library, which would be wonderful. And here's an example of that, I think. So this looks to me like it has elements of stitching in it on the right hand side, and I can see that the collage is standing proud of the surface a little bit. And then in what looks like potentially a later stage, although of course I might be wrong about this, it looks like you're still perhaps in this image working with composition.
Yeah, so with that one I was
a little bit more resolved.
A bit more, yeah. So I was starting to introduce colour at this stage after sort of collaging black and white imagery. But I was actually also experimenting with different markers like watercolour, pens and things like that to see how they sit together well, how did they react to water, or placing them on dry or layering wet on dry. So yeah, that was just experimenting to understand the art and like how to progress forward and how it might look at the end. It never looks down, I think it's going to look. It always ends up changing again. But yeah, with that one, that was fun experimenting with the different colours
and then that gets eventually resolved into a digital surface like this, which still, I mean, to my mind, this retains quite a strong sense of collage to it. This piece particularly reminds me of Jean Arp's collages.
Yes, this one did start its life as a physical analog collage with like different shapes and sort of that I put together. Sort of composition wise, it was with coloured paper. So yeah, they sort of in that instance, I want to understand contrast with the collage, and I find it hard to do with just like white paper. And then it was scanned, and you could tidy it up a bit because obviously when you're making artwork in your studio, you get paint on it. You can see like you've rubbed out lines, and although I don't mind that, I don't think it's bad. I just think when it comes to surface pattern design, you want a bit of a neater design, and so I put it through Photoshop just to tidy it up and make it a bit more presentable for a surface pattern. I guess it's one of the differences maybe with my surface pattern design. They're a bit more refined for the purposes of printing, but when it came, maybe if I was going to show artworks in the gallery, I wouldn't mind so much having rough, stray bits of paint or pencil marks or shading still on there or something like that.
Yeah, it's horses for courses, isn't it? I mean, the different types of work in different settings.
Yeah, 100%. That's true. So I think galleries are good for like that more tactile like work. What I like about Photoshop as well, which you can see in that artwork, is you can play with opacity. Can't do that in real life. So some of those pieces of paper, I could actually like really dim down that opacity so they almost seem like you could see through them. So I mean, you can do that in real life. You're going to try different types of paper, but it's just very easy to do that when you're using something like Photoshop. Yeah.
But I think what's extraordinary about the work that you've created particularly, I mean, it's really evident in this piece here, is that on the textura canvas, it does have a kind of physical feel. It still looked to me like a collaged image. And if I see it and think about it, I can probably deduce from my own experience of creative workflow that it's been made digitally, but that's not actually how it comes across. It still has that kind of physical feeling at the same time as being neat and resolved in the way in which you described. So it's a wonderful quality that your work has. And I want to go back just to something you said a moment ago when you were talking about the Nazarene pieces, which was that they have that there's a name, there's an allusion in the title, which is this, I think you said it was a Persian word for rose, which people are either going to know or they're not going to know. And if they don't know it, then they will look at the work in perhaps a slightly different way and have to take a different route. But you've intimated a few times in this conversation that your works, actually not so much that it has symbolic meaning, but that it uses symbolism. There's a difference between those two things. It's like the symbolism becomes an ingredient rather than a riddle that someone can solve. It's like, it doesn't feel to me like you're trying to say something that could otherwise be written down as a message. It's a visual experience. But there is something happening with the symbolism and the illusions that you're making in your work. And you talked earlier about the importance of mythology. You've intimated that you're interested, you didn't use this phrase, but perhaps in something that I would describe as being like esoteric art, which is art that might express some kind of hidden, maybe spiritual or philosophical meaning. And when we met the other day, you mentioned that you were interested in someone that, to be honest, I don't know much about, but what I do know I find absolutely fascinating, and that is the Swedish artist Hilma af Klint. And I have a photograph of one of her artworks. First of all, the artist in her studio. I think she was working more than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And I have a piece of her art that we can put up on the canvas as well. This is from, I think actually this piece is in Australia. I think it's in Melbourne from memory. And this is the painting Youth. I'd be really interested to know a little bit from you why you find this artist, Hilma af Klint, so interesting.
Yeah, so an artist I find really interesting is Hilma af Klint. And one of the reasons was when I first saw one of her works, I didn't know of her at the time. I was just really drawn in by these lots of color, lots of abstraction, and almost like there was text, but there wasn't quite text. And I was just really fascinated by it. And because they're also very large scale paintings, and they just felt very like immersive. And then I found out that she's an abstract artist who was predating Mondrian and Kandinsky, but she had connection with the spirit world. So I was like, well, that's interesting, because throughout my art, although my art isn't esoteric, I think through growing up, I got interested in maybe things like tarot, mainly because tarot has an image, but behind that image, you can infer meaning depending on other cards it might be next to. So I think I've always been a bit interested in that. And although it's not the main focus of my art, it is imbued with that. And I found it really interesting that I found an artist who actually she would see visions, and I think she could hear spirits. And then she would then go ahead and create these artworks based on what they had said or what she had heard. And there's like these botanical elements in it. So there's a focus on like our connection, like human nature's connection to nature. And she's also very focused on, like she had the series where there was youth, but then there was like adulthood. So she's also looks at different stages of human life and like our evolution. And I just found that very deep, very introspective, and just really fascinating. I don't think I've ever heard of another artist, that works like that. And so, I became very interested to just know a bit more about her work and, her artworks. And what I found interesting with her, another little tidbit that I found very fascinating was when she was making a lot of her artworks, she didn't want them released to the public for 30 years after her death. And the reason she did that is because she didn't think we like whoever it would be, were ready for her artworks and were prepared for the message that was in them. And I just thought that's like a very visionary thing in yourself to do. I've not thought about me having a legacy, but I feel like she was really thinking about the future of her art and how it would be perceived and what kind of different, I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but what kind of world it would be presented in. I mean, the world she lived in is very different to the one that we live in. So that was really fascinating. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you know, it's as you say, if one knew nothing about it, you just looked at that painting and one might think, well, yeah, it looks like it's an abstract painting language that could be made maybe any time from sort of 1970 to now. I mean, it doesn't even have the kind of sort of, I think a lot of early abstraction has a kind of stiffness to it, a kind of formalism, and that's not in this work. There's something which is different going on that comes across as being informality, but it obviously comes from a completely different place. And there is a narrative that, you know, the first abstract painting was created by Kazimir Malevich, who's the Soviet supremacist painter in whenever it was, 1917 or thereabouts. It's not 1917, but I haven't got quite the date at my fingertips.
It was the black square, wasn't it?
That's it, the black square. Yeah, the black square, which is a kind of really iconic piece of art. But these predate that by several decades, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yes. She was sort of, I think in the 1800s, late 1800s, even, like she was creating these works. And it's interesting, we don't hear much about Hilma as Klint, but we hear a lot about other artists, as we were talking about before. So your female artists maybe at that time period weren't, they weren't in the public eye as much as maybe their male counterparts. So that was kind of interesting too. It was interesting to learn that she predated like Mondrian and Kandinsky. I was like, that's just really interesting because I'd never really heard a lot about her in my art studies, for example. We heard about the big hitters, but not so much Hilma.
Yeah, the same. She didn't feature at all in my education. And it's not until I think relatively recently that she's become celebrated with shows of her work in international galleries. But it's an extraordinary story and an incredible trailblazing figure. I want to return to talking about you, and particularly a really savvy pivot that you made around about 2020, where you seem to me, well, I've just been looking at your CV and reading various things about you online, but you made a bit of a move from a traditional gallery circuit to then found the Painted Lady Studio and take your work in a completely different direction and focus a bit more on commercial licensing. I wonder what prompted this strategic shift.
Yeah, so around 2020, around COVID, I had a bit of a strategic shift in my output, and how I was thinking about creating art. In part, during COVID, it was hard to find studio space to work in, to create work. And so I was sort of at home a lot more as well. So it was a bit of a natural pivot to work at my home studio, and obviously it was very small and it was easier to work online and using sort of my computer to make artwork. But I still felt a bit disconnected working that way. And so I was looking to find a sort of shared working space, shared kind of office space for creatives. And I was looking online and I found a company called ArtShine, and I sort of saw that they were offering sort of shared creative space. So I thought this could be really good opportunities to hang out with other creatives during COVID and make new work, and found out that was actually no longer being offered as a service. However, they were still existed. ArtShine was still there, and they were having an upcoming mentoring intake to mentor artists to help them understand how to develop work for the surface pattern design industry. So sort of nurturing your creativity, but at the same time teaching you the business principles and how to commercialise your work, which is a really different way of working than showing in a gallery, just making work to show. I mean, galleries can be commercial, but like on a large scale, like surface one design can be displayed on many different types of substrates in different places at the same time. It's a little different. And so then, I took a bit of a pivot and I learnt more about surface pattern design. And that's when I decided to start Painted Lady Studio. That's when it came more like solidified and official. Beforehand, it was more just like maybe an idea floating around my head. But then I decided to, sort of establish that to make it more concrete. And it was also, therefore, felt more like, I guess, legitimate, for lack of a better word, as a surface pattern design business to introduce people to.
It seems to me that you've, throughout your life, really, you've taken risk in order to grow creatively. And that was a risk that you're describing in 2020 to kind of pivot in a particular direction, but it seems to be paying off.
Yeah, I think you need to take risks, not just in like your creative career, but just in general. I think doing things that you're not too sure of or a bit scared of, or it's out of your comfort zone, are always good to do. It doesn't have to land. It doesn't have to work out. It doesn't have to be the best thing you've ever done. But you learn a lot from it. You can meet new people. You can find that you have skills and talents and interests that you didn't know you had before. There's been a few times where, I've taken a risk or done something that was a bit outside my comfort zone. It's one occasion I'm thinking about. I used to do a bit of writing about 10 years ago when I was at university, and I'd written a piece for the performance art section of the university to perform on stage. And the lady in charge said, "Oh, why don't you just read it? You can do like a spoken word piece." I was like, "That's not happening. I'm not standing in front of thousands of people with a microphone speaking." And she very gently persuaded me to do it. She gave me coaching about how to speak, how to do a spoken word, like where to put emphasis on words, how to slow down or speed up or soften your voice or louden your voice. And so I got up there and I had an artwork, one of my artwork is a backdrop as well. And I got up there, and I sort of read this spoken word piece. I only went for about 5 minutes. It felt like an hour and in front of thousands of people. I will never do that again, but I did it. And so I've done it now. And it was rewarding though. Yeah.
I bet it was. What an incredible experience. So one piece of advice that you would have for artists is to take risks and embrace new challenges. There's something else I would like to ask you about as well, because putting your work out there as you do can be really daunting, because as soon as you put your work out, as soon as you publish it or license it or show it, people are going to have opinions about it. Mm-hmm. And something that artists often struggle with is taking criticism on their work. An artist's work is personal. Most artists are, to a greater or lesser extent, personally identified with their work. And so it can be very difficult to take criticism well. What advice do you have for handling criticism and feedback, especially when so much of your personality is invested in your art?
Yeah, so as artists, we put a lot of personality into our art, and that art therefore becoming criticised or people having opinions on can be a little difficult to take, to understand, and to just allow to wash over you. You will take it personally. And I think it's important that people aren't criticising you, although it feels like they're not criticising you. There might be something about the work that they don't like. And it's just personal taste, for example. But I feel like criticism, hearing negative things about your work is still a benefit to getting criticism. And I think criticism from strangers is easier to take than criticism from people you know, in my experience. It may not be the same for everyone, because if you don't know people, well, they don't know you, and they've just got an opinion, and that's okay. I don't like everything when I go into a gallery either. You can just look at it like that. That's all it is. But when people know you and you see them every day and they don't like your work, it can be really confronting, because you're like, because you want your friends and your family or whatever to support you and champion you and like everything that you do. But it's still worth taking the risk, because you get better at taking criticism the more you show your work. You just have to show your work. It's the best thing you can do. And after a while, you don't take it personally anymore. It's just information. And to be honest, people are going to like your work more than they don't like it. People see things in your work that you don't see, things that you don't like about your work. They don't see that. They have completely different impressions as well, and how they speak about your work. So I always found that really interesting. People would have takes that I'd never even thought of before, because I would sometimes eavesdrop in the gallery if I had an artwork there, just to see what people were saying or how they were reacting, because they didn't know I was the artist. And it's actually, it's people tend to like the work more than they don't like it, in my opinion.
No, I think that's so true. So embrace risk, be open to criticism, listen to feedback. And then there's one other point that I wanted to ask you about, which is I've read somewhere that you describe yourself as being agile. And I get a sense of that from your ability to travel and try out new experiences. One day you're in a pub in Blighty pouring pints for geezers, and then the next minute you're having dinner with a Maharaja. So you've got to be pretty agile to deal with that degree of change, I would think. But creatively, you're able to produce work at any scale and in a rapidly changing creative landscape. I wonder what staying agile means to you in a practical sense. And finally, what's next for the Painted Lady?
So staying agile in your arts practice is how you kind of survive as an artist. So doesn't mean you have to completely change what you're doing or sort of pander to maybe like what people might like or what they don't like. But I think remaining agile to me is through my experiences I've had where like I was a backpacker in my 20s and I was on a working holiday visa and I was working in pubs in rural England, and then I was in India and I was like learning how to make pottery, but then all of a sudden I'm at this party with a Maharaja. That to me is being agile. You kind of just have to trust your instincts. Obviously, you always need to be safe when you're making decisions, but if just going, like just saying yes and not just doing it, like that's to me is staying agile. And I do that not only in my creative life, but even in my personal life with other types of work that I do or experiences that I choose to partake in. That's what agile is, because then you keep moving and you keep getting new ideas and that's how I feel like that's what agile is in a practical sense, I would say. And
just keep on moving.
Yeah, just keep moving, because that's it's also, I think in moments, if you're thinking too much, you never have, well, if I'm overthinking something, I never really have ideas, but I'll get an idea when I'm just in the middle of doing something I wasn't really planning on doing or something totally new. Because I think your brain gets freed up a bit and you're not sort of stuck on a point. It comes to you when you least expect it, when you're doing something maybe a bit random that you never thought it would do. Yeah. So what's next for Painted Lady? It's a good question. At the moment, I'm working on some new works where I'm incorporating some new techniques. I'm still in the beginning stages of combining like collage with like embroidery. So this idea of working online, but then bringing it back into the real world and embroidering on it. So from a creative perspective in the business, that's what I'm doing. And then I think longer term, I wouldn't mind maybe doing some more residencies. I wouldn't mind spending time in like an immersive experience with an artist, learning something new, being somewhere different. And also maybe moving into the commercial art world a bit more solidly. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I feel like I've had enough time now of exposure to the industry and sort of I don't have to, I can still maintain my creative integrity, even working in a commercial space. Sometimes as an artist, you feel like you're going to have to, like, I don't know, in quotations, sell out, or you're not going to be able to like do what you want to do. But I think I've found like a balance of that. So I'm feeling more confident now. It's taken a few years, but I'm feeling more confident now that I can move into, a more sort of business or commercial space and still remain true to like my creative ideas and what I like to do. Yeah.
Fabulous. Melissa, thank you so much. That's been absolutely fascinating. And I hope we'll see more of your new work coming into the Vieunite library so I can enjoy it on my Textura screen here in my office. But it's been wonderful talking to you today and hearing about your journey, both physical across the world and also creative. Thank you so much.
Well, great. Thank you. It's been great talking with you as well. Thank you.